Drop it. Hands behind your head. Get on the ground. Now!
You can radio it in. 1782 Echo. I'm on assignment. There's no call.
The morning air in Newark buzzed with the familiar hum of container trucks and distant train horns. It was just after 8:00 a.m. near Port Street, a busy corridor lined with freight depots, customs offices, and industrial cafes that catered to everyone from dock workers to federal inspectors. Jamal Pierce exited Beanline Cafe, a small brick-fronted shop with a bulletproof window and the best black coffee in the industrial district. Dressed in a dark navy suit, polished shoes, and a DHS badge clipped visibly to his breast pocket, he carried himself with the kind of alertness that never fades after years in counter-trafficking work. He didn't see the patrol car pull up behind him. Didn't expect the voice. "Hey, stop right there. Let me see your ID." Jamal turned slowly, trained in how not to escalate. He raised both hands slightly, left his coffee on the ledge, and said, "Morning, officer. I'm with Homeland Security. I'm here on assignment." He reached into his inside jacket pocket and pulled out his credentials, extending them openly. A federal badge, DHS SEAL agent ID number barcode, plain official, unmistakable, but the officer didn't even glance at it. "Drop the wallet. Hands behind your head. Get on the ground." "Sir, this is a federal ID. You can call in the code 1782 Echo. I said get on the ground. There was no threat, no resistance, no probable cause. Just a uniformed local cop barking orders at a black man in a suit. Jamal looked around. Two pedestrians nearby stopped walking. One, a delivery driver, fumbled for his phone. Jamal raised his voice, calm but firm. "I am Special Agent Jamal Pierce, Department of Homeland Security. I am authorized to be here. I am not resisting. This is being recorded." But it didn't matter. In less than 10 seconds, he was tackled. The officer forced him down one knee into his back, crushing the DHS badge into the pavement. His arms twisted, wrists cuffed, concrete against his cheek. "This isn't necessary," Jamal said through clenched teeth. "You didn't comply," the officer snapped. Jamal didn't move, didn't scream. He repeated his name and his agency. 2 minutes later, a female officer arrived. She recognized the name immediately. "Wait, Pierce from DHS." The original officer hesitated, radioed for confirmation. A voice crackled back. "Confirm Pierce Jamal. Active Homeland Security badge 1782 Echo. Verified." There was a pause, and then a shift in posture. But by then it was too late. The damage was done, not just to Jamal's wrists or suit, but to the illusion that rank training or federal credentials could shield a black man from disbelief. Jamal Pierce never planned to work in law enforcement. Growing up in Mobile, Alabama, he saw more red and blue flashing lights outside his home than on television. His mother worked nights as a nurse. His father, a welder, died in a worksite accident when Jamal was 12. That left him with questions. About structure, about chaos, about protection. In high school, he didn't have much. But he had discipline. He enlisted in the Marines the day he turned 18. 4 years later, after tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, he came home with a sharper mind and steadier hands, but also a sense of vigilance that never turned off. The Department of Homeland Security recruited him in 2010. At first, he worked logistics, then surveillance, then human trafficking. By 2023, he'd built a reputation as one of DHS's most respected field agents in the Northeast. He spoke at conferences, led multi-agency task forces, trained rookie agents on threat assessment. In his current assignment, he was overseeing Operation Night Watch, a long-term investigation into a suspected smuggling ring using Newark's shipping lanes to traffic firearms and unregistered tech. On the day of the incident, he had planned a low-visibility stakeout. No tactical gear, no raid. Just a quiet surveillance detail with 2 other plainclothes agents observing a suspect container. Coffee was a necessary prelude. That's when he met Officer Brian Lasky. Lasky, 37, had been with Newark PD for nearly a decade. Before that, he was a mall security guard. His file was average, no awards, no major disciplinary actions. But if you looked closer, there were 4 civilian complaints in the last 3 years. All 4 involved stop and frisk incidents with black men near the port. All 4 were closed without formal discipline. Lasky was known among his colleagues for his intuition. He called it gut instinct. Others called it something else. He believed in order. He believed that a suspicious person didn't need to be doing something wrong, they just needed to feel wrong. He also believed that uniforms trumped badges. That local officers ran the block no matter who else showed up. To him, a black man in a suit near shipping containers. Carrying a bag. Walking like he knew where he was going. That was cause enough. And so in that moment outside Beanline Cafe, their 2 worlds collided. One, a seasoned federal agent with clearance levels Lasky could only imagine. 2, a patrolman whose idea of authority was rooted in control, not understanding. And despite everything Jamal had done, his rank, his record, his sacrifice, it took less than 60 seconds for all of that to be erased by a single assumption. That assumption wasn't about national security. It was about skin. Jamal wasn't confused. He had seen this before, just never from the ground. Jamal lay still on the ground, cheek pressed to the pavement, his DHS badge bent beneath his chest. He didn't struggle, didn't yell. Years in the field had trained him to de-escalate even when being unjustly subdued. But this wasn't a covert mission in a hostile country. This was New Jersey. And the threat wasn't a trafficker. It was the uniform on top of him. The street was waking up around them. A city bus hissed to a stop across the intersection. The cafe door swung open again. A barista named Thomas stepped out holding a broom and a phone. He paused, saw Jamal, saw the kneeling officer. Then he hit record. Behind him, 2 dock workers leaned out from their warehouse loading bay. "Yo, that's Agent J," one of them whispered. They'd seen him before, polite, quiet, always tipped well. More importantly, always flashed that federal badge. There was no mistaking who he was. Another voice off camera? "He already gave ID, man. This is messed up." Within seconds, the incident moved from confrontation to spectacle. Phones out, cameras rolling, a quiet crowd forming. A courier paused his bike on the curb watching. One woman, Clarissa James, a legal assistant at a nearby freight firm, spoke up. "Sir, I saw him show his badge. That's a federal agent." Lasky didn't respond. His focus was still locked on Jamal, as if control alone would justify the takedown. "He said he was DHS," someone added. You didn't even look at his ID, but then from the corner of the block, a second cruiser pulled in, dispatched in response to the elevated call for non-compliant suspect. Officer Mia Torres stepped out. Young, composed Latino, she immediately noticed the crowd and the posture of her fellow officer. She jogged up, eyes narrowing as she caught sight of the credentials partially visible under Jamal's body. She spoke clearly. "Brian, he's a Fed. Look at the badge. That's Homeland." Lasky didn't move. She crouched slightly. "Sir, can you confirm your agency?" Jamal lifted his head just slightly and spoke between shallow breaths. "Pierce, Jamal, badge 1782 Echo. Homeland Security, Task Force Human Trafficking." Torres stepped back and reached for her radio. "Dispatch confirmed, badge 1782 Echo Homeland." A brief crackle. "Confirmed, Agent Pierce, DHS active clearance." Torres turned to Lasky. "Let him up, now." The officer hesitated. "I need full verification." "You just got it," Torres shot back. "He's legit." Reluctantly, Lasky released the cuffs. Jamal sat up slowly, rubbing his wrists. The crowd was quiet now, but the silence was heavier. Not out of peace, but disbelief. Clarissa kept her phone pointed. "Say your name again, sir?" she asked gently. Jamal looked into the lens. "Special Agent Jamal Pierce, Department of Homeland Security. This is how they treat us, even when we're the ones protecting them." A murmur ran through the watchers. And that's when it spread. The video. The soundbite. The moment where an officer chose force over facts and a federal badge became just another discarded truth in the shadow of racial suspicion. Within the hour, the video had over 12,000 shares. Posted first by Tomas, the cafe worker, then picked up by Clarissa, who added one chilling caption, "He showed ID." They still made him bleed. At minute 0:32 of the clip, Jamal's voice is clear. "I am Special Agent Jamal Pierce, DHS." His badge is visible. His hands are empty. At minute 0:41, he is forced face first to the pavement. At minute 2:03, Officer Torres arrives and confirms his identity. By minute 3:17, Jamal is sitting up, wrists red and bruised. That 3-minute sequence set off a national wave of fury. But before it went viral, before it hit newsrooms or reached D.C., Jamal walked himself into the emergency clinic on Bay Street. Diagnosis: strained wrist ligaments, soft tissue, bruising, no fracture. He paid out of pocket, refused DHS medical coverage, said it was a personal matter. That afternoon, his supervisor at the Department of Homeland Security saw the video. Within 2 hours, the Office of Inspector General for DHS issued an internal security memo. Field Agent Pierce temporarily removed from Operation Nightwatch until further notice. They didn't ask if he resisted. They didn't ask if he failed protocol. They asked, "Can you avoid being a liability?" The same system he swore to protect was already shielding itself from him. In the following days, the cost of that moment began to surface. The case Jamal was working, Operation Nightwatch, was put on hold. The container he was tracking cleared customs by accident. Surveillance data was lost. One suspect fled the country. 3 years of work gone. And through it all, Jamal said nothing publicly. But the silence around him grew louder. Community leaders in Newark demanded a city response. Civil rights attorneys began preparing letters to APD. Cable news stations ran headlines like, "Black Homeland Agent Detained by Local Cop While on Duty Badge Not Enough. DHS Agent Slammed to Ground by Newark PD." The tipping point came when a retired ICE director appeared on MSNBC and said, "What happened to Agent Pierce isn't just racial profiling, it's operational sabotage. If our federal officers aren't safe from this kind of ignorance, then the system is broken at its roots. By the end of the week, DHS had no choice. They reinstated Jamal to full duty, quietly, no press release. But the damage was done. The physical injury healed quickly. The professional one, that stayed, because Jamal hadn't just been hurt. He had been dismissed. By a man who didn't see a badge, didn't see an agent, didn't see a human, just saw a body he could control. And for 3 unbearable minutes, control was enough to override everything else. The mask came off in the second wave. First, the outrage was local. Then it turned personal. The full version of the video, nearly 7 minutes, was released by a civilian who had captured the entire event from across the street. Unlike the shorter viral clip, this one included Officer Lasky's initial radio call, suspicious black male, possibly casing shipping lots, no ID shown. That one sentence ignited a firestorm. Because not only had Jamal shown ID, he had identified himself by name, badge number, and federal agency. Clearly. Repeatedly. The public read that transcript as something else entirely. Suspicious black male. No belief in what he says. Use force if he doesn't submit. A former DHS press secretary tweeted, "This wasn't a failure of verification. It was a refusal to acknowledge black authority." As calls for accountability mounted, Newark PD issued a short statement. "We are conducting an internal review into the interaction between Officer Lasky and DHS agent Jamal Pierce. We take all allegations seriously." But silence followed. Jamal, however, did not stay silent. 6 days after the takedown, he broke protocol and filed a formal civil rights complaint with the Department of Justice. His complaint cited unlawful detainment, use of excessive force without probable cause, obstruction of federal duties, violation of 4th and 14th Amendment rights. The DOJ confirmed receipt. And then unexpectedly, Jamal spoke. Not on television, not with press, but in front of Congress. A hearing on racial bias in federal policing had been scheduled weeks prior. Jamal was invited last minute. He arrived wearing his Navy suit, same badge, still scuffed from the pavement. When asked to describe what happened, he didn't dramatize it. He said, "I didn't get thrown to the ground because I broke the law. I got thrown to the ground because he couldn't imagine me enforcing it." The room was silent. He continued, "This isn't about training. He was trained. This is about expectation. He expected someone like me to be lying. That assumption cost us 3 years of work. But worse, it cost me the belief that my badge protected me." His words hit headlines across every major outlet. "Couldn't imagine me enforcing it" became a rallying phrase for black officers nationwide. But the deeper revelation came a week later. A whistleblower from within Newark PD leaked Officer Lasky's prior civilian complaints. Each one shared the same pattern. Black or Latino male. Near commercial district. Accused of suspicious behavior without probable cause. Escalated into forced detainment or verbal confrontation. In one case, Lasky accused a Latino delivery driver of stealing his own truck. In another, he handcuffed a black high school teacher trying to unlock his classroom door after hours. All closed, all unsubstantiated. Until a federal agent with receipts a platform and nothing left to prove. In one of the final interviews he gave, Jamal was asked what hurt most about the encounter. He didn't mention the pain, didn't mention the suspension, didn't even mention the lawsuit. He simply said, "It wasn't that he forced me down. It was that he looked at me like I was never meant to stand." Jamal Pierce's lawsuit wasn't just a legal move. It was a statement of survival. 2 weeks after the incident, his attorneys filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against the city of Newark, naming both Officer Brian Lasky and Police Chief Ronald Miles in their official capacities. The suit alleged violation of constitutional rights under the 4th and 14th Amendments, obstruction of federal operations, excessive use of force without legal basis, negligent hiring and supervision. The requested damages, $10 million. The complaint was 42 pages long. Page 17 quoted verbatim from the dispatch transcript. Page 24 included still frames from the video with timestamps. Page 31 listed the names of 5 prior civilian complaints against Lasky. Page 40 cited Jamal's DHS clearance level and 11-year spotless service record. But the most powerful page, page 3, a single line in bold: "This is what happens when a black man shows credentials and is still assumed guilty." The suit landed like a thunderclap. Civil rights groups rallied behind it. The National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, NOBLE, issued a rare public endorsement. Agent Pierce was not profiled as a threat because of his actions. He was profiled because of his existence. The Department of Homeland Security, despite avoiding comment, at first released a formal statement supporting Jamal's right to seek redress for treatment incompatible with the values of interagency cooperation. Public pressure mounted. 3 weeks in, the city of Newark offered to settle privately $2.3 million. Jamal declined. He didn't want silence money. He wanted a record. He wanted policy. So he raised the stakes. He held a joint press conference with his legal team and former DHS mentors. There, Jamal outlined 3 non-negotiable demands: permanent decertification of Officer Lasky from law enforcement service, mandatory anti-bias and de-escalation training for all Newark PD officers, a city ordinance barring local police from detaining verified federal agents without cause. The mayor's office hesitated, but the outrage didn't stop. 1 month after the lawsuit's filing, Newark residents staged a Black Badge March, where over 300 black professionals, judges, prosecutors, postal inspectors, military officers walked silently through downtown with their ID badges exposed. Their message, "This could have been any of us." National media ran the story. DHS agents from across the country sent letters of solidarity. Finally, after 6 weeks, the city caved. Settlement $5.8 million. Officer Lasky permanently resigned. Policy amended. Training restructured. Ordinance passed. The Pierce provision. But even in victory, Jamal kept the tone measured. In an op-ed for the Washington Post, he wrote, "I didn't file a lawsuit to get paid. I filed it so no other agent would be forced to choose between their duty and their dignity." He founded Pierce Protocol, a nonprofit dedicated to teaching officers how to recognize federal credentials, training civilians on their rights during unlawful stops, advocating for systemic police reform from academy to street. His first workshop in Newark, at the same intersection where he was thrown down. He opened the session with this: "I was detained because I didn't fit the idea of someone with authority. But I belong in this uniform. I belong in this country, and I belong on my feet." Jamal Pierce's story became more than a news cycle. It became required reading. In criminal justice seminars, it's taught as a case study on constitutional violations in field stops. In federal training academies, it's dissected for failures in interagency recognition. In community safety workshops, it's discussed as a blueprint for how to respond not just with emotion, but with action. Because the real lesson here isn't just about race. It's about assumption versus authority. Let's break it down. 1. The Fourth Amendment isn't optional. Every person, regardless of profession, is protected against unreasonable search and seizure. Jamal showed ID. Clearly. That should have ended the encounter. Instead, it escalated without legal cause. 2. Probable cause is not based on race or dress. Looking out of place is not a legal justification. The courts have ruled repeatedly that reasonable suspicion must be tied to specific, articulable facts. A black man in a suit. Not enough. 3. Interagency respect is foundational to national security. Pierce wasn't just an innocent civilian. He was a federal agent in the middle of an operation. By ignoring his badge, Officer Lasky compromised an ongoing Homeland Security investigation. That's more than misconduct, it's operational sabotage. 4. Bias doesn't need slurs to be lethal. Lasky never shouted racist language, but his every decision was filtered through a lens of disbelief. That's how modern bias works, silent but systemic. 5. Documentation is protection. The crowd filming, the transcript, the video clarity. These weren't just viral tools, they were legal shields. They transformed speculation into evidence. 6. Representation doesn't eliminate racism. Jamal was the system. He was the badge, the clearance, the patriot. And yet he was still flattened onto the ground by a man in the same profession. His uniform didn't protect him. That speaks volumes. 7. Reform must be structural, not just symbolic. The Pierce provision is now codified in Newark. Officers must verify federal credentials before initiating detainment or face disciplinary review. That's a small but vital step. Change is not apology, it's architecture. In the years that followed, Pierce Protocol grew. It partnered with law schools, justice reform groups, even police unions ready to admit they needed help. Jamal didn't aim to destroy the system. He aimed to correct it. Today, inside the DHS regional headquarters in Newark, there's a wall of honor for agents who have advanced interagency cooperation. Jamal's photo is at the center. The quote below it isn't from any ruling or law book. It's from his congressional testimony. Power doesn't look like me to some people, but I carry it anyway. And for every black officer, attorney, agent, teacher, and civilian who has ever been questioned, not for what they did, but for who they were, his case is now more than just a cautionary tale. It's a precedent.